Today, we're sharing a time lapse of my sunset painting where you'll see the process of creating some beautiful reflections and lots of trees in this painting. And as you watch, I'll just share some tips and techniques for capturing reflections with watercolors. So let's dive in. Hello everyone. So today we're jumping in straight into a painting without doing any preliminary sketching for this one. I find that working directly with my brush really allows me to capture a more spontaneous look with reflections and sunsets. So this method helps me keep my painting process more fluid and intuitive, and it lets the colors and the shapes kind of evolve more naturally. When painting reflections, I usually will start by turning my paper sideways, and in this vertical motion, it helps me mimic those light reflections by mirroring both sides of the reflection. Another thing you want to think about is blending for softness. Notice how I will use a damp brush to blend those edges of the reflection. This technique really softens the transition between the reflection and the water, giving it a more natural look. And you can see by adding these colors at the same time and rocking your paper back and forth, it gives that nice softness to the sky and the reflection. I also build up the reflection in layers. I start by using those lighter tones, the light yellows, and then I gradually add a little bit more depth using some darker values like those pinks or opera rose, some oranges. And layering techniques like this, by adding the color, really adds that richness and a little bit more realism to some of those reflections. I also love to use white gouache or bleed-proof white with a soft brush to fan out the clouds once I have painted in the basic colors in the sky. And you can also do this while it is still wet, and it just gives it, again, a really nice softness. Reflections are also very distorted a lot of times, so I allow for some irregular shapes and some lines, and I think this is going to add some authenticity, make the reflections look a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more interesting to the person looking at your painting. I also want to give you some tips with painting trees and creating that depth and that realism, as well as doing it in the reflection. When you're painting trees, it's essential to go beyond just using that single shade of green. And nature really is just full of variety, and capturing that diversity in your work is going to make your trees appear much more lifelike. And one way to achieve that is by using multiple colors or shades of green. So instead of reaching for just one tube of watercolor green paint, like a sap green, mix your own greens. Try using some yellows, adding some blues, even a hint of reds or browns. I love using browns and blues together to get that really dark value. And by varying the ratios, you can create a range of greens that's really going to mimic the complexity found in nature. If you're looking at trees, you see so many variations of color in there. So you can see at this point, I have really just a few. I'm now adding a little bit of blue to this green. I'm going to add a little bit of brown. You might want to have a piece of scrap paper just to test it a little bit. And you can see it's still getting a little bit darker, but you always want to start off with those lighter shades when you are working with watercolors and gradually get darker. So start with that base color of your tree. Use a medium green mixed maybe from a combination of blues and yellows, and then add a touch of different colors to the base, and that's going to give you that subtle variation. For example, if you mix in a bit of yellow to create a lighter, more vibrant green for those areas where the light hits underneath, I usually start with that. And then on the opposite end, add a small amount of blue or maybe even that hint of brown or red to darken that green, and that's going to create those cooler tones for those shaded areas. And that variation in your color temperature is going to suggest really where that light is coming from and how it interacts with the leaves or maybe the foliage if it's changing color in the fall. And then that's going to help you incorporate the value scale for some depth. So let's talk a little bit about the value scale. It's really crucial when you're painting trees to add that depth and that dimension in your seascape or landscape. And value refers to the lightness or the darkness of a color, and manipulating value is really that key to creating the illusion of depth in your painting. So I'm starting here by blocking in the overall shape of the trees in that light to mid-tone green, and that's going to serve as the base, and it's going to allow you to build up that form with the shadows and the highlights. And for the shadow parts of the tree, you can see I'm using a darker value. This might be a green. Again, we talked about this earlier, touched with like a little bit of blue or brown, and it's going to create that deep, cool shade that suggests the areas where it's more dense or where the light is not reaching it. And applying these darker values sparsely at first, creating just a little bit, using them to carve out kind of the shapes of the trees and suggest areas where the branches or the pine needles maybe overlap, and it's going to cast shadows on each other. And this layering technique really helps build the tree structure, and it's going to add a sense of depth to your painting. So next you're going to add some more highlights. For this, you can use a lighter value of green, or maybe even using white gouache mixed in with green or a yellow. You can use more yellow tones for a very hint of light, almost like you would with an oil painting when you're adding it. So using that opaque color is going to help pop out if you get some areas too dark. And it's kind of like my little cheat. And those highlights are going to give the areas a hint of light, right, where the uppermost outer pine needles are going to be. And by strategically placing those lighter values in there, you're going to create that illusion of like a sunlight kind of filtering through the branches in there. So you don't want to cover everything. You want to let a little bit of that light green shade shine through. And by looking at this, you can kind of imagine yourself standing in a forest during that golden hour just before sunset. You know, the trees around you are bathed in that warm, soft light, and there's little patches of sunlight kind of filtering through the canopy. And you get those little patterns of light and shadow on the forest floor. And as you paint about it, think about this play between light and shadow. And you can kind of mimic this interaction by using some, bolder strokes, some darker greens, maybe where things are thicker, where you're just kind of tapping your finger and filling in some of those colors, just little lighter patches of greens and yellows to indicate where, the sun's kind of peeking in through there. So as you continue to layer those values, your trees are going to start to emerge, and not just as like a flat green shape, but something that's more a living, breathing part of the landscape. So the different shades of green combined with those, use of light and shadow is going to create that form that's going to capture the viewer's eye, and it's going to guide you through the scene that way. So the value scale really becomes your tool for storytelling. It's going to not just tell the shape of the tree, but it's also going to talk about the time of day, maybe the direction of the light, and the moment that you're going to try to capture. It just gives you more feeling and more depth when you're using all of those lights and darks. Does that make sense? So I hope by incorporating those multiple colors and using the value scales effectively, you can really transform those simple green blobs that we first start with into something really detailed and lifelike trees. Is going to enhance the overall depth and the atmosphere of your painting.
So I hope you enjoyed watching that sunset painting come to life. I hope it helped you choose some ideas of things that you can use to help you capture that beautiful reflection. My live tutorial sessions on my Patreon page. We did part 1 and part 2, and it takes about 2 hours roughly. And in there I go over all the details and share my step-by-step process for you. And don't forget, if you like this video, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. That really helps me grow my channel. It lets you know when new content comes out each week, hopefully each week. Feel free to leave a comment and your thoughts down below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.